You're watching Shani Speaks Now. Hey there, Faith Fam. It's your girl Shani here. And even though you cannot see me today, you can definitely hear me. During the month of October, I have been highlighting Miscarriage and Pregnancy Loss Awareness Month and had an amazing interview with the author of the book, I Love You Still, Margaret Schofield, and thought that it would be great to share that interview with you all. Please hang in there because there's a little bit of some sound glitches and technical difficulties that we had at the very beginning of the interview, but it's an amazing interview and I hope that you'll hear more about my story, learn more about the book, and be able to enjoy the conversation. So check it out.
There we go.
Yay!
Hi! Hi, Shani. How are you?
Good, Margaret. How are you?
I'm doing well. Sorry it took a second. I was trying.
Okay, I knew that we had been both trying to figure it all out because first IG Live, I know this is your first IG Live. So yeah. I already prepped some of those that came in early. May have some difficulties, but we were going to.
Yeah, pretty much. That's how it went.
But so good to see you. So for those of you that are just joining, we're going to get started. But for you that don't know, me and Margaret have literally been talking probably since the summer. She is, and after I received her book, I Love You Still, and was just so touched by it, I decided to reach out, not knowing if she being the sweet person that she is, she actually responded very quickly in DMs, and we've been going back and forth in emails, and actually planned to do this earlier, I think in the month of September, but had to postpone it until now. But I feel like now is the perfect time because of October being miscarriage and infant loss awareness.
Yes.
But perfect time. This is a time where, you know, women who may have experienced, or families, I should, not just the women, it's also their partners that have lost a child, whichever way, whether it be miscarriage, whether it be from a stillborn, whether it's them having their baby and then the baby, you know, only living for a little while. This is probably a month where they are thinking about it because it may be something that they may see on social media or in the news article. So I'm glad that maybe it didn't start or happen ahead of time, but I think this is the perfect timing for it to happen.
I agree.
Yes. So we'll get started. For those of you who do not know me, I know she shared it on her feed as well. My name is Shani. And outside of just being someone who loves to encourage people, who is always trying to give a positive word, in real life, I'm a realtor. I also do a lot of entertainment, kind of covering different award shows, different events with a production company here locally in Florida. And outside of that, I just love putting positive vibes. I have my own YouTube show called Shani Speaks Now. That's my. And I, this year, had an experience with a miscarriage and pregnancy loss. And that kind of what put me on this strange trajectory, because this is not something I ever thought was part of my life or a part of my story. But, you know, different things happen to us in life that we can't control. All we can control is how we them. And I was actually listening to a sermon, I think last week, that like really, really touched me. And one of the talking about is how people handle pain. And it said that people through it making them callous, through it giving them passion. And I feel that that's what my experience did for me. It gave me a lot of passion, even more so about just this sort of pain. I've obviously have had friends who have gone through miscarriages, so I've always had my heart go out to them, but like experiencing it yourself. And it's such a weird phenomenon to try to explain to people who haven't experienced it because it's just so isolated. So my compassion has really born just this weird stage, so to speak. I want to talk about it more, to make it more open. I know I know it's something that makes people sometimes uncomfortable. You don't know what to say. You don't comfort someone. You don't know what to do. There can be, so just trying to make the communication a little bit more open, and also try to give so many people that I found once I shared that they have experienced this, but for whatever reason it's private, they may not have talked about it. And then in me reaching out, I've gotten DMs, I've gotten phone calls, I've met with friends and people to discuss the person. And I realized that there's people in the community, they wish they had someone to talk to, they wish they had resources. There is somewhere like where someone like Margaret comes in, because she's an amazing resource. And I just want to be able to put that out there and give people to talk about it more, make it less taboo, and just make it more of a comfortable conversation. because at the end of the day, unfortunately, miscarriages happen. 1 in 4 pregnancies will end in miscarriage. And it doesn't happen just on the first child, which was my experience. I know friends where I had one friend recently, their 5th child. There's people who have 1 child and that happens. You never know why it may happen. It's not your fault that happens. Most times it happens in your body that you can't control. So that's a little bit about what this discussion is going to be about. Before a little bit into my story of how I got the book, I want to give Margaret the opportunity to introduce herself and share a little bit about herself as well. Kind of interview her and really have a conversation about the book, because me and her were on the phone for like an hour last like other forever. So I know it's going to be more of a than it will be an interview. But Margaret, please tell who you are and just a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much. So my name is Margaret Schofield. I am the author of I Love You Still, a memorial baby book, which I wrote over here to the side, so you keep seeing me look to the left. I wrote it for my friend. Her name is Ann Pearson. She actually was also my 5th grade teacher, believe it or not. And then we stayed friends as I grew up. And as you were saying, so she lost her 4th baby.
Wow.
Always imagined that she would be, sorry, my screen just went a little dark. I'll make sure I don't lose you. Always imagined that she would be a mom of 4. That's really how she identified, how she pictured herself. And she lost her baby. It would have been, I think, the day before Christmas in 2017. She named her baby Riley. And it was heartbreaking for her. And it was also something that she kept rather private. But through social media and other ways, I was able to kind of see what was going on. And she was just this enigmatic, motherly, wonderful woman. And for her to lose, for some reason, I've had other friends, my 2 closest friends also had lost babies in the past. But for some reason, when Anne lost her baby, it struck me. And in this really kind of primal way where I really wanted to reach out, I really wanted to comfort her. And so my first instinct was to go look for a baby book, assuming that there would be many options for those who had, an unfavorable outcome to their pregnancy. Just like there are so many baby books available for, typical pregnancies and typical birth stories. And I just didn't. I was met with nothing. It was like my heart dropped to the floor, seeing that absence. Seeing the prevalence, among women, among our friends, our sisters, our moms, and yet that absence in the industry. So that's really where it all started, was I wanted to set out and kind of fill that void for my friend. And, it was a long journey. I did not know anything about it when I started. I'm still learning, which I'm sure we'll get to later. I'm still learning the ins and outs of that industry. And trying to see what has taken, the world so long to really make the resources available and cater to these moms like my friend Anne. And that's really how it started. And once I made the book, I had created it, and I had solicited help from March of Dimes, from First Candle, Share Pregnancy and Infant Loss Support, Postpartum Support International. My college, University of Arizona's alma mater, my alma mater, School of Medicines, trying to get everybody who, I'm no expert, so I tried to get all the experts in, get their opinions, ask them, fellow moms, what would you like? What would you want to have in this book? What's important to you? And then knowing that I had really one shot to make it, I wanted to make it as inclusive as possible, so I really carefully worded it so that babies lost at any gestational age, it would work for everybody, regardless of their faith, regardless of how many children they already have, regardless of whether there was a funeral service, or, some moms aren't even fortunate enough to see or hold their baby at all. And so I wanted to make sure that the book really worked for all of those, if this were to be the only book available, if that makes sense. So that's really how it started, and that's what I've been working on since.
Job with that, and that's what's about your book. I'll share my experience. How I had to first place. My pregnancy actually started 2021. That was the first thought I was, and they didn't have my, like maybe four. I was like, oh, I have to be pregnant. Test. They were kind of. I said, you know what? And I think, but yeah, thought that was pregnant. Only to real what was actually happening. I had fibroids and endometriosis, and what I was experiencing, my fibroids, extreme pain, and I journey to then have surgery, get pregnant. Finally had us last year in 20, and in the top of the year. However, impression that I was going to sort of fertility, IUI, something else. Pregnancy was not be able to, have. Then in of 20, I did not know, but and found out 2022. Took my test and so excited because I didn't think I thought that naturally have that I was gonna. So needless to say, and my amazing husband, so elated, and I don't know what that immediately I felt like the day your mind, the way it works. Stomach was already out, breast were swollen, all the different things. Tired. It just put me in this. Starting to celebrate. We had taken a trip, sister and Las Vegas. I shared with that. Everyone has celebrated. Come back and celebrate with my family, planned on taking. But we had to have first, which we were baby, and officially be able. And unfortunately, first appointment, able to see the baby. We realized and had what's called because there was literally sick. I wasn't. I didn't have any pain. I thought every normal, and I that my poor 6 days prior having that. So needless to say, after having that experience, I was devastated. I was almost right at that like 8-week point, so almost 2 months into my pregnancy, and it was almost like it ended before it even started, and I was just like grappling at like what I could do and how I could cope, because I knew that there was going to be a crazy grieving period. And I think just because I'm the type of person, I'm very much an empath. I'm very in tune with other people's feelings. And thankfully I could be a little introspective, and I just knew that I needed to allow myself the opportunity to grieve. It was not something that I wanted to tuck away. It wasn't something that I wanted to pretend that didn't happen or just, forget about. I wanted to embrace what had happened to me. I wanted to discuss in time, because it wasn't immediately that I discussed it, what had happened, because I had a feeling that if I was feeling the way that I felt, that there were other women that were feeling that way as well. And in my journey to then try to find some ways to cope, I did a lot of things. I mean, I created jewelry, which I actually had a bracelet that had my baby's name on it, which we eventually named our baby Dame Michael, and found out over time that our baby was a boy. I had a necklace made, which I had the sonogram on the necklace, and that was some way for me to tangibly be able to have something. But one of the best things that I found was her book, I Love You Still, because it was a way for me to process what I was going through. While I love being able to wear the jewelry and love being able to, have some of the different things that I had, those were more tangible items for me to be able to remember my baby by, but they weren't necessarily the things that were going to allow me to process it. And when I looked for a book, thankfully, her book was one of the first ones that popped up. I saw it on Amazon. I bought it right away. And I was it took me a while to actually dig into it. I think I bought it in March. I don't think I actually completed the book until maybe May or early June, maybe right before I reached out. So it wasn't something that I immediately jumped into because it was hard. I, opened it, and you still have to grapple with the fact that you're even writing in the book, that you're even putting this book together. But the way that you put things together was just so perfect because, as you mentioned when you were speaking, you really did think of any stage that someone could have lost their child. You thought of almost anything that they may have wanted to maybe consider keeping an idea of. And that was super helpful for me. And that is why I reached out right away and was just like, we have to get on live. We have to talk. We have to share this. I want other people to have these resources. And I also wanted to be able to give the book to some people that may be able to hopefully be able to get one today if they need it, or if they believe they have someone they know that needs it, because it's something that really, really, really helps. And before I get off of, my soapbox and add you back to the conversation, I wanted to just share a little bit of my book, since my book is open, and share a couple of excerpts from my book so you all get an idea of what the book is like. And then hopefully I'll be able to talk to Margaret and find out what her process of writing the book was like, and the crusade she's on now to try to get this book and other books like it into the hands of women that need it in our libraries and, online, and all the different places that they may be able to find books that will be able to help them and be able to help them cope. And hello to anyone that's joined recently. The book, I Love You Still, it allows you to put pictures in it. It allows you to basically start first off from your love story with, your partner, to share how you all met. And it starts off with the family tree. But two of the things that I really, really appreciated being able to share, and I'll read it quickly, is there's a section on it that's called Something's Changed. And essentially it is the section that allows you to share when you notice that there's something that may have happened that may have caused you to now realize there's something taking place with your pregnancy. And I will share that part. And then I will also share another part of the book that is called Things We Told You, which I think was just one of my favorite things to be able to share. So I'll share about that, and then I'll get Margaret back on so that she can tell us how this book came together. But it says, Something's changed. When I first knew something was not as expected, I was 7 weeks and 4 days pregnant. I was feeling so confused as everything seemed it was going perfect. Outside of major fatigue, being bloated, and swollen breasts, and my hips spreading, I felt amazing. I was experiencing nothing really outside of what I already described. I had really bad allergies that week, but nothing else out of the ordinary. I remember thinking I was so hoping the ultrasound was wrong and the doctor would tell me something different. I was so desperate for the news to be wrong and for you to still be alive, and somehow I was so crushed. And then it gives me opportunity to talk about where I was cared for, who I was cared for, and then what I was told. And it says there, I was told that I had had a miscarriage, meaning that you had died with no real symptoms or signs that something was wrong. I had no bleeding, pain, or any indication that something was wrong. My heart was literally broken in that moment, and something in me changed. I was then given the instructions on the next steps I had to take to remove the embryo/tissue from my womb. And those words hurt the most because you instantly went from being my baby with so much life to just an embryo and tissue. And it was unbelievable and unimaginable. And then I went on to share the things that we told you, which is just kind of some of the things that I shared with my baby. I said every morning when I woke up, I would thank the Lord for a new day. Then I'd say, good morning, baby. How are you feeling today? Are you doing good? I'd pat my belly and rub it to, quote unquote, give you a hug. And also in the shower, I talked to you all the time and prayed for you often. You were always at the top of my mind when you were with me. I miss you so much every day. And that's just a little bit about from my book. And I also share my picture, one of the pictures that I took in the early processes of my pregnancy. But I'm so grateful that I have this book now, and I'm very hopeful that I will have a family again, because I still feel like in the moment that I had a family, that I'm still a mommy to that baby. And like I said, that baby's name was Dame Michael. And I found out later that what happened is I had what's called trisomy 7, which my baby was being born with 3 chromosome 7s, which is an abnormality with the chromosomes that the baby was not able to survive. And that's something that, from what I've been told, happens about 45% chance of that happening with a lot of pregnancies. So essentially that is the story that led me to the book and finding it and me reaching out to Margaret. So Margaret, hopefully you can turn your mic back on and there won't be any echoes, but once I ask you questions, I will mute mine so that you can answer those questions. So hopefully we can be on together. So go ahead and see. Okay, there we go. So and I'll let you answer. But you never experienced miscarriage. This was not something that happened to you, even though you are a mom, and I'm sure an amazing mom. What inspired you to go through this process of writing a book? I've had friends who have experienced this, and I've also felt very, a lot of compassion, but I never thought to go as far as to create something to help them in that pain. What allowed you to do that?
So, really my inspiration for writing the book, like I said, it was Anne, it was her nature, it was what she's going through, but it was even more so the fact that she was going through it privately. And that's fine. You know, some people do choose to, you know, everybody grieves so differently, but I want that to be a choice, and I want you to have other choices, all the choices. I want, you know, it's what you'd want for your fellow mom to have, all the support she could possibly need, to all the resources she could possibly need, you know, hoping that the powers that be, you know, allocate the appropriate amount of resources into research, into improving birth outcomes, improving pregnancy outcomes, things like that. And then, you know, perinatal mental support, things like that. You want to do your part. But really, in addition to that, it was my own children. It was the fact that I had just had my second son. I have two boys, they're just over a year apart, and I had just given birth to my second son, I think just months before I learned about Anne's loss. And so that was very fresh in my mind, all those emotions. I was still healing. I was still, you know, getting into the swing of being a mom of two. And that thought was just right at the forefront of my mind of what would I even do if something were to happen to my son. And then when you see that, you know, your friend is in pain, and the people who you would think would do this or have this established haven't, you have this urge, or at least I did, to not wait around any longer. And from what I've heard from other authors, fellow authors, some of them are doctors by trade, but they wanted to have a resource for their patients, and it wasn't there. So some of the best authors have created books just for their patients, or their patients who have children already, who, you know, want to be able to, you know, broach the subject of grief with their children. How do I do this? You know, I've never had to, you know, consider this before. And so they would make these materials when they too noticed that the materials didn't already exist. So that was really what spurred me to start it. I do have a background in writing. You know, my major in college was English, so I had done a little bit of writing. I had been published a little bit, but just ever so slightly, nothing really serious. Marketing was what I did by trade, so it was a little bit of a departure, but at the time, in the marketing position I held, you know, I sat next to a graphic designer who I got along really well with, and now he ended up, you know, lending his talents to the layout of the book. So all of these things kind of had to fall into place, and luckily, you know, you when you do something like this, you encounter a lot of doors shutting on you. You know what I mean? There's a big learning curve. There are a lot of things to kind of assess and accumulate and compile, and luckily, there were enough people who had grace and understood where I was coming from, and, you know, I mean, this touches a ton of families. So luckily, you know, for every 5-10 doors that, you know, were shut on you, you'd have one that would open. They'd say, okay, you know, I've been through this. My sister has been through this. Let me steer you in the right direction. And that gesture happening over and over, it was really the reason why this book even exists at all today. It was because of the care that people took to make sure that, I think I might have lost you. Hold on. She's frozen. There she is. You're frozen.
Okay.
Here, I'll mute to see if you're okay.
Okay. I think your connection, are you still there? Okay. I think you're freezing up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to hear me, Margaret?
Freezing on and off. It's not so much the sound that's the problem. It's
Got
the fact that your the picture comes and goes, like you're
it.
freezing.
Okay. And same on my end. Technology, gotta love it. So I'm curious, what was it like for your friend when how did you present this to her? Did she know you were working on it? And what was it like for her when she realized that you were creating this book and that she was the inspiration behind it?
So at the time, I was living out of state, and so I was in Arizona, and my friend was still back in Minnesota, where I was originally from. And I had already started working on it, but I would not have released it. I kind of compiled the materials and made a really rough manuscript with just pictures I'd thrown in, and I presented it to her. I basically, when I was in town, I'd asked her if we could go to lunch, and I presented it to her at lunch that day and said, because I had already made a donation. Believe it or not, I had been on Wheel of Fortune earlier that year, and the first thing that I believe is when you come into good fortune, the first thing you should do is give some of it away. You know what I mean? The first thing you do is think of charity, think who needs it. And so she was actually the first person on my mind. So I had made a donation in Riley, her daughter's name, to Ronald McDonald House of Charities. And so she knew I was doing that, but it wasn't enough. It didn't sit right with me. So when we went to lunch, I presented her with this like truly a binder of glued, like Elmer's glued papers and things like that I compiled, and said, would this be okay? Would it be all right if, I wrote this for you, for Riley, and included you on this? And thankfully, which she did not have to be, she was extremely supportive from the beginning. She's kind of taken aback a bit, but she gave me her blessing from the onset, and so after that, I mean, I just hit the ground running and just went full bore, and that's been my main focus since I think about 2016. I got the manuscript copyrighted 2017, and then just kept on going and trying to raise awareness and try to, open up the discussion to as many people as possible. And Anne was always, I mean, she is such an amazing woman. She's so supportive. So she's been really supportive from the beginning. She was a little stunned at first because if you think about it, we're just going to lunch. It was something I wanted to bring up face to face for sure.
Now, one of the things mentioned was just how you looked for resources and found none. And you've been on somewhat of a crusade to get this book into the hands of people that need it. And what did you find, if you can share with those that are on, what did you find was, one, the difficulty in trying to get this book just into libraries, and explain a little bit of kind of the politics, so to speak, behind that? Because it was news to me until I actually reached out to you to realize that it was something that wasn't categorized and was so difficult for a lot of people.
So you're not the only one. I was doing this and I didn't know. I was being told no. I was being told, the book is beautiful, the book needs to be made, but we can't help you. And I was told that this was back in 2018. I was taking the manuscript, and you basically kind of submitted, it's called querying a publisher or an agency, saying, this is a manuscript that I'd like to put out there, and they can say yes or they can say no. And generally speaking, it's no. Like many will say no. And that's kind of the status quo, and you don't hear a lot of feedback when they do. But those that were kind enough to give feedback, you kind of hold on to it and use it constructively. And they would say, the book is beautiful, but there's no genre. I don't know where to put your book. And that was it's so sad to think that I didn't think about it at the time, but it was in one ear, out the other, and I just kept rolling to the next person. And then after several years, I published it myself. It's been shipped to over 30 countries, just me. It's also in Barnes & Noble and Target and Walmart, but it's only the English speakers of those countries because it's just me who's making it. And, it had, I don't even like to think of it in these terms, but enough commercial success, right? There's enough of a proven audience, 1 in 4 women, 24 million women across the world every year that this affects. There's a built-in audience enough that I was like, okay, well, I don't understand what's wrong here. I don't, what am I missing? And so I kind of, last year, I started diving into, when they say there is no genre, what do these experts mean? And in doing so, I found out that books that are for sale in the US or in North America, so the US and Canada, are categorized for online sale using something called BISAC codes. So you would normally have genres for books that are, you know, fantasy, fiction, nonfiction, biography. So that's a very lumped type of generalization. BISAC coding is for organizing them in e-commerce, Google search results, store aisles, everything uses it, including the agencies and publishers who would represent an author. And in doing some digging into and they're available, people could look up BISAC codes right now, I found out that there is no category for miscarriage. There is no category for stillbirth. There is no category for, you know, neonatal loss. There's no category for SIDS. NICU stays. I think NICU might have a category under nursing, but no category for NICU loss. So perinatal loss of any kind is not specifically covered. And you might think, well, what is covered? You know, is it too specific? Well, so I always like to give people examples of houseplants has a category. So does water aerobics has one. Yeah, and then cryptocurrency has one, Bitcoin. So that kind of, once again, I had that sinking feeling of how there are things that don't affect nearly as many people. There are things that are relatively new, and they're all being kind of every year voted into existence. And yet how is there still no specific category on the popular and the medical field side of these?
And Margaret,
mm-hmm.
when you were asking about these different categories, what was the reason? What was the excuse? Was something that's so prevalent? And I mean, you named every possible thing. I mean, NICU, stillbirth, miscarriage, SIDS. To think that these things are happening every day to women all the time, or families all the time. What was the excuse? Like, what were you getting as feedback?
So I did reach out to the administrators, the committee that's in charge of it, and they have said that, which is true, this is what I did for my own book, because I was self-published. I actually did this on my own. When you have a publisher or an agency, they will do this on the author's behalf. So even authors who've written on the topic and been published, they don't necessarily know anything about these BISAC codes because someone else does it for them. I had been told what you can do when there's no code for you is you pick 2 or 3 of the next closest. So you could pick, there's one for general bereavement, and there's one generally for pregnancy. You pick them and you pair them. The problem when you do that, though, is that it gets lost in the mix. There is no specific spot for it. So if you today were to Google, a bereaved mom or baby loss, you very well could get results that have to do with the loss of a grandparent, the loss of a parent, because it's the general bereavement category that your book would fall in. And so even if I'd have to look, but I think even still, Amazon categorizes my book as self-help. It's in the self-help section. There's no section. So they will say that you can just pick 2 or 3 of the next closest, but in real terms, we know that this really greatly affects all authors' chances of representation, being published, and then the people who need these resources, their ability to find them. That's really the problem. And the other thing is, when the U.S. or we tend to be a leader in things. So if you were to change our coding system, for every indication, the rest of the world would more or less follow suit. So if we can get something to represent perinatal bereavement, perinatal loss in our coding system for our literature, and this includes digital and print media, I mean, this can include television, everything. If we can do this, many others will follow suit. And so it would be, a really big change in the end.
Wow, that is insane on one hand, but I thank you even more that you took the time to figure these things out and to do the research and to go as far as you did. Who knew when you were doing this just out of the compassion that you felt for a friend that it was going to take you on such a crazy journey? But I'm thankful that you were committed to that journey, because a book like this in my hand, like you said, it might be entitled self-help, but it's something very specific. And I remember searching specifically when I looked for it was I think I searched for either how do I grieve a baby or baby memorial items or whatever the case may be. And it was one of the first books that popped up. But self-help is not or bereavement is not even what I would have thought. It's a very specific need, and you're looking for specific things when you go through something like this. I'm grateful that I was able to find it. And I'll ask you this last question and then maybe see if there's anyone that has questions themselves, and then do the giveaway, because I know it is a Sunday and I don't want to take up too much of people's time. But now that you have this book out here, what has been your reactions from mothers who have been able to find this book, like myself? What have been the reactions of them? What have been the reactions from your family, or, you know, even people from the outside that may get the book in your hands? What are the reactions that you get via email or whatever the ways that people contact you may be? How have people responded to your book overall?
The response has been really positive overall. The response from moms is unbelievable. It's I always consider it a really sacred space. Like, this is my absolute most cherished work. I put every bit of what I could, all the resources I had. Like I said, I went on Wheel of Fortune and all the money went right to this, you know, went to my friend and then into this project. I sold a car to fund the first printing. I did everything that I could to try to get it made. But even still, I cannot tell you, when you reach out, and moms will reach out at 11 at night, you know, and I know what that means. I know where you are. It's such a sacred space. It's like, motherhood is so sacred to me. It's something that unifies us and ties us all together. You know, it makes us so we're not strangers. And so when I hear anything positive to where they believe that this book is worthy of their child's legacy, I will do whatever I can. It's absolute fuel to fight for them, to make the changes that are necessary, to, you know, to do everything that I can to think that, you know, our daughters, I mean, if you think about it, how much has changed over the last several decades. The fact that we're even having this conversation right now would not have happened 10, 20 years ago. Even when I started writing the book, the conversation has changed so much. People are so much more willing to discuss it. And so it's been really wonderful to be a part of what breaks down that societal stigma, that taboo. It is, you know, it's entirely unfair to do that to these women. And you know, it's such an isolating, you know, grief is so isolating naturally, that when I hear that the book did anything to help someone process or grieve the loss of their baby, it's been really wonderful to get that kind of feedback. It really has.
And Margaret, I'm here like low-key tearing up and trying to keep my life together because it's very okay, hold on, keep it together, Shanique. It's very strange to hear someone so compassionate about something that really has nothing to do with them. Like, this is not your battle to fight. This is not your experience. This has nothing to do with your life outside of, you know, being a mom, having a friend, caring about somebody. And just hearing the lengths, and I saw someone, you know, mention just your persistence, your perseverance, you know, God choosing the right person for this assignment. But it wasn't something that even came on my radar fully until I had that experience. And, you know, obviously now it's something that's on my mind every day, but it's very heartwarming for me. And I mean, again, we talked for like an hour before, so it's not like the first time we're having this conversation. But even in just hearing you discuss it the way that you are, as a mom who has experienced miscarriage, and for moms who have made, you know, experienced pregnancy loss, I just want to say thank you for having this resource, but for caring, like for real caring. It means more than probably you may ever know. And for that, I'm really, really, really grateful that this book came in my hands. And you are right that I found this book at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. could not sleep. It was like a week after my miscarriage, and I was trying to, my schedule was all over the place. My body was doing all kinds of weird things. I was still just grappling with everything. I waited till the daytime, I believe, to DM you and to reach out. But it's right. It's a lot of sleepless nights. It's a lot of not knowing what's happening. It's a very weird transition to go from 1 minute you are a mom and your mind completely changes, and somehow having to like reprogram yourself, and you go from being a part of the mommy club to now feeling like I've been kicked out of that, and where do I fit now? Like, what am I supposed to do, and what happens next? And you also sometimes feel a little bit crazy to be missing a child that you didn't meet. In my case, I didn't have an opportunity to meet my child. My child was gone before it was developed. For some mothers, I can only imagine the heartbreak if they, bear a child that's already asleep, or if they've had, an opportunity to spend a couple of days or to spend a week or however long with their child and lose them up to any stage. But it's just a beautiful thing to be able to have something that allows you to really process your grief and capture it. And I know that was my reason for looking for something, because I knew that if I didn't process my grief, if I didn't capture it at the moment that it happened, I didn't want it to be something that ate me up. And your book helped me do that in more ways than I probably even imagined, because you ask so many great questions, and you give so many different ways to express yourself, and even how you break down, I mean, literally from conception all the way to, those 40 so weeks of pregnancy. So literally at every stage you're able to, go through it. I remember looking at the book and thinking to myself, there were two things I thought when I saw those pages. I thought, wow, I only really get to do like the first couple of weeks because my experience wasn't long. But then at the same time, I thought, well, what if I was a mom who had to go through all these pages? So there's just these weird things that you kind of think of when you are going through the process of it. But to know that you can have the process and you start off and end still with celebrating, the idea of family and you and your partner and, becoming a family and family trees and going through it, but then still ending on, well, how do you feel and what do you remember, and, what was the best parts about it? So even though you go through that grief process, literally as you're writing the book, you can still end on a positive note. And it's something that I will cherish. I'm praying that I'll have, other children that I'll be able to share, and have something now that I can really be able to share a story and say, this is what mommy went through. This is what happened. This is what it was like for her, and for them and other people to, understand. But I really, really, really appreciate you just taking the time to be on here. And I'm going to see if there's anyone that may have questions for you or for me. I don't know if anyone has questions about what I shared with my experience, or if they have any questions for Margaret. If so, feel free to put those questions in the comments. And then I will wait a little bit for that. And then if I don't see any questions, I did come up with a couple of different questions that people can DM me the answers to, and I have those 2 books. And if there's 3 people possibly that want it, then I want to gift an additional book, which I will purchase. Margaret was super sweet because she donated 2 of those books. But if there's more than 2 people that feel that they have a need for this book and would like it, then I will also gift another one. So I have a couple questions that I can ask, that hopefully you'll be able to answer. Just DM me after this live and I will get your information and mail the books out to you. But is there any questions that anyone has about my experience so far, about why I'm even doing this in the first place, why I'm having a live and talking about such a sacred taboo topic? Or does anyone have any questions for Margaret just about the process of writing her crusade, what you can do possibly to help, where you can find the book? And I'll actually have Margaret share, if people want to connect with her and follow her journey as she continues to share her book. I don't see any questions as of yet.
So I have a question for you.
Oh, sure.
If you want to. I know we talked about it a little bit on the phone, and I thought it was so interesting, your perspective, and I don't think it's discussed very much. But when you had found out that you had lost the baby, and then there's that time period in between when your medication is starting to work, I think you and I talked about it being a really out-of-body experience, how you're present, but you pause, and you're there, but you're not. And I know that you had to attend some, or you were at least invited to some baby showers around that same time. So if you're willing, I thought what we had discussed on that was really, really important and kind of more nuanced than what most people think of when they think of, baby loss and the struggles with it. But that's all part of it. I think we talked about even commercials on television,
Oh my gosh.
things like that, and the Molly Bear that you got. And so that's the kind of stuff that I loved. I love to hear about, you know what I mean? Because I think you navigate that really well, and you really stay positive, and you're very, very thoughtful in the way that you approach those things.
Sure. Well, that question. So, as I shared, when I had my miscarriage, I had no idea. And I think one of the things that I realized that is very difficult, and I think we know this with just professionals in the medical department, we are a client, we're a patient, but there's so many other patients they're going to see throughout that day. There's so many other people they're going to talk to throughout that day. So what becomes completely devastating to us becomes, all right, well, this is your situation. Let's get you in here and let's get you out of here. I'm so sorry that you're hurt. I'm so sorry you're grieving. We need to go to the next step. And essentially, that's kind of what happened to me. Once the sonographer realized that my baby wasn't there, they actually intimated it, but wouldn't tell me completely. So there was a moment, as crazy as it is, because in your mind you want to believe anything, even though I knew I didn't hear a heartbeat, there was a moment where I was still somehow holding my stomach thinking like, okay, maybe the doctor's going to tell me something different. Like maybe there's just something different, because, the sonographer was like, the doctor will let you know what's happening. So there was like this weird glimmer of hope. And then immediately when the doctor comes in the room, she's like, I'm so sorry. And that's when it hit me, when I heard her say that. And she's going into the motions, and all I'm hearing is like, wah, 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 because it's like, what in the world is happening? And she's telling me the next steps, and I literally burst out crying. And thankfully my husband was there, where she had to pause and realize like, no, you just told me that this child that for the last several weeks I've been excited about, I've been celebrating, is no longer here. And I think that's something I wish that medical professionals understood a little bit more. But there was this weird time frame, because in my case, which everyone's different, in my case, they tell you there's 3 different ways that when you have a miscarriage, which with every different stage is different, that you would have to, what they call, expel the pregnancy. It's also called a misabortion, which can also mess with your mind a little bit too. So that's another thing. But in my case, I had choices because of the time frame where I was in my pregnancy, where I could either wait it out and see whether my body would, expel the pregnancy naturally, which is not something that's recommended, because you never know how long it's going to take. It can make you really sick, all kinds of different things. I could have what was called a D&C, which is basically a procedure where they eliminate by suction the child from your body. So it's almost like a surgery. But I had just had surgery a couple months prior to, because of my fibroid. So that also didn't seem like the best option. Or you could take medicine, which essentially would cause you to have contractions, and then you would then expel the baby on your own at home, which is also, they're all awful. Like, it's just awful no matter what. But that is the option I chose, because I had been told the baby had already possibly no longer been viable in my body for 6 days already. So at this point I said, let me go ahead and take the medicine. However, we went in on a Monday. My husband had to fly out for a business trip that Tuesday and would not return that Thursday. And the doctor was very specific in saying, do not take this medicine until, he comes back. So there's this weird, like you said, the out-of-body experience, where now this baby that I'm waking up and saying, good morning, baby, how are you? How your day is going? I realized I just have now, as they call it, just tissue in my stomach. And for roughly 2 or 3 days, I'm waking up every morning realizing like there is a baby that's in my stomach, but there's nothing happening. And that's a devastating and traumatic thing within itself. Finally, once my husband returns, I take this medicine. It is the worst thing ever. Immediately I felt pain. Immediately I started feeling contractions. And that's a process of like 3 days of lots of bleeding and pain. And, on one hand, you're knowing you need to do this. On the other hand, you're grieving it happening, because you know that once this process is done, your pregnancy is done and you're no longer a mom. But you know that you can't keep this baby in your body because they're no longer alive. So it's just weird mental things that are going on. Emotionally, spiritually, things are going on. And like I said, for me, this all happened. So on television, commercials about what you want to purchase for your mom. There's all these commercials about kids and their parents, and I am like, in my mind, I am a believer, but I'm thinking, Lord, what are you trying to do to me right now? Like, it is already difficult. This is already hard. But now it's like reminding me what I thought I was going to celebrate this weekend. In one way, I'm having to grieve not only just this child, but then also grieve the idea of motherhood during the week right before Mother's Day. It was awful. And I think that's the side of it that you don't see. And then there's other mothers where they lose their babies a lot later. So they don't have a choice. They have to either do a DNC or they have to deliver this child. There's other people that obviously, like I said, their baby is asleep. And if you are delivering your child, then you have to go through the process of actually having a funeral. It's just so much deeper than people realize. And I think I think that's why resources and these conversations need to happen, because I can understand how, one, either women completely cast everything away and pretend that it can never happen for a while until it comes up somehow, or two, how women can fall into a deep, dark depression that no one ever knows because the world is still going on around you. No one knew. I still had to answer phone calls. I still had to have meetings that I had to have. I still had to do all these things and still process all of this. But I being just an intrinsically positive person, and like I said, being a believer, I knew my faith would carry me. I knew this had to be a part of my testimony somehow. It is not something I would choose for myself. I would not wish it on my worst enemy. It's so very difficult. But at the same time, I just knew that something had to be done about it. And I know it helped me to talk about it. And as I talked to other women and hearing their stories and how different all of our stories were, I just wanted to have a platform, wanted to do something. And it's not something that my whole platform is not going to be about this, but when I feel led to share, I'll share. When I feel led to have an Instagram live, I will. When something else happens in my journey, because my journey is still happening. I'm not a mother yet. I believe I will be, but I don't know everything my journey will entail. I'll continue to share and hopefully be able to, celebrate a viable pregnancy soon. But I appreciate you asking that question, because I think there's so much that goes on behind the scenes. And then also just sometimes the ostracism. I've talked to some friends who have gone through it, and, they were the ones in their, friend group that may have gotten pregnant first. And, they took all the pictures and did all the fun things. And then once their pregnancy was no more, they then were not invited to those things. After I actually had my miscarriage, because my immune system was so low, the medicine had so many terrible side effects that I had gotten sick. I ended up contracting COVID. So I went through the miscarriage process, went through 2 weeks of that medicine, got COVID. So now not only am I grieving that, but I'm now in the house stuck with COVID. My entire month of May was just sickness and miserable. And then having to somehow recover from that. And you already feel like you're in isolation and you're the only one. And I remember having moments where I thought, like, okay, God, I know you, I love you. If you want to take me now, like, miscarriage, COVID, back to back, like, I have some goals. I have some things I want to accomplish, but if this is it for me, I'm okay with that too, because it's just too much. But then, different resources like your book and different small outlets give me hope. And I found that just speaking about it took so much weight off my chest. I just didn't want it to be a secret. And I'm grateful that I had opportunities to speak, and that people have been so kind and even caring to talk about it, including people like yourself, that when I reached out sincerely to you, that you were so willing to have this discussion. So for that, I'm so grateful. And I want you to give people the opportunity to know how they can keep in touch, how they can follow you, where they can find you. Again, if they want to purchase the book, and then I'm going to go ahead and give the books away that I do have. I'm going to put out probably like 4 different questions. So if you get any of these 4 questions right, and you're the first 3 people to get to me, then you'll be able to have the book either for yourself, or if you have a friend, because I've seen some people say, I had a friend that just went through this, or I know someone that experienced this. Then if you'd like to gift this to someone, that's also something that I would love to do as well. So Margaret, let them know how.
Oh, sorry, I'm gonna pause you a little too early there. So people can reach out to me anytime. My email is margaret@iloveyoustillbook.com. I'm also on Instagram, which is where you reached out to me. I check that not quite as often. For some reason, it doesn't, all these updates, it doesn't ping up on my phone like it should, and it really bothers me because I really don't like to leave anybody hanging. But there are, you know, you can see what I'm up to, and there are resources available at I Love You Still Book on Instagram, and then it's also on Facebook as well. And anyone who wanted to buy the book, it's available at Barnes & Noble, I believe Target, Walmart, all major retailers carry it. And then there are, you know, the secondary sellers and stuff online that you can find them in smaller bookstores as well. So it's out there for anybody who wants a copy. And then I know we were talking about resources, and I would be remiss not to share some of the ones that have been on board. I mean, it's been amazing, you know, when you just get this, you know, relative, you know, this unknown person reaching out and saying, hey, could you help me? Could I list you in my resource section of my book? March of Dimes is on it like that. So like I would say, March of Dimes, if you need resources, is amazing. They're really dedicated to, you know, prematurity, and there's been kind of an increase in spite of modern medicine in premature births, and it's kind of unexplained, and that's really become a main focus of theirs. They do incredible work. And then there's Share Pregnancy and Infant Loss Support. They do lots of fundraising. They have really great events for bereaved moms. There is, let's see, we've got Postpartum Support International. They're amazing as well. They have helplines that are available all the time. Sorry, my computer just went dark if it changes color. So they have a helpline that 24/7. They have volunteers that are constantly staffing it. And then, let's see, Faith Lodge is a great organization that I've known since 2018. They're an actual physical retreat that you can go on. Yep, they have counselors available. It's really about, it's really like an intensive, healing, supportive retreat. There are so many wonderful organizations. Star Legacy Foundation is one that's actually local in Minnesota here, but they have chapters all over the U.S. They were the first ones. I think the book might have even still been in manuscript form, and I sent it to them and said, do you like this? And they were amazing, had great feedback. They've been very supportive. They have amazing resources. There are so many wonderful organizations. And then there are also organizations that people could find in their hometown. So if you want, you know, peer-to-peer support groups, those are really available almost everywhere. You just have to look a little bit and do a little bit of research. There are some amazing organizations out there. So the biggest thing is whether or not this book is something that, you know, someone would want, or something that would work for them. Just don't be isolated. If you need somebody, you know what I mean, there are amazing resources out there. Reach out to people. If you don't even want to do that, your doctor, if you were to call your doctor, your healthcare professional, your doula, your midwife, you can call them. They will have resources available to you. They'll know what's local to your area. Just make sure that if you're suffering at all, it doesn't matter time of day. It does not matter. It doesn't matter. You're not sounding needy. Just reach out. Trust me, this happens to more people than you think. Trust me, more people will do more for you than you think. So always reach out anytime you can.
Thank you so much for those resources, Margaret. That is amazing, and it's good to have that information. And I'm actually going to make sure that I send you an email so you can send me an email for those resources, so I have those resources too. That way, if there's anyone that's on this live or just that I meet in general, I can hopefully give them those resources and see if any of them can still help me, because I'm still on my journey of healing as well. And, you know, there's different triggers, there's different things that can happen. You never know when you're going to have a moment. I can walk into Target and see a shirt that says Mama Bear and lose it. I can see a Huggies commercial and lose it. I can, you know, there's just so many different things. I know when it first happened, I think I had shared that I was invited to a baby shower. I had COVID, so I couldn't go. But, you know, initially even thinking at the time when I first got the invitation, I was still pregnant. So I was just like, oh, I'm going to this baby shower and I'm going to be pregnant too. And no one would know, only to realize like, no, that's not what it is either. And, you know, all those things are just different processes. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share. I don't want to take up too much more of anyone's time. This has been longer than I thought it would be, but it's been so good. And I'm so grateful for those who have hung in there. So again, I'm going to ask a couple questions. And if you are able to DM me the answer to any of these questions that I asked, I will go ahead and send one of these 2 books that she sent. And then also, if there's more than 2 people that reach out to me, the third person, I will purchase a book for them to be able to have for themselves as a resource, or for someone that they know that they think may need it. So what is the first name of Margaret's friend that she actually wrote the book in the honor of? Just her first name. I believe I saw her hop in on the live too. But what is the first name of her friend that helped inspire the book in the first place? So that's one question. What is my baby's name? And some of you that know me may already know the answer to this, but what did I name my baby? I think I mentioned it a couple times. I have my little Molly bear behind me, but you probably won't be able to cheat because it's too small for you to read the name on the Molly bear. So what is the name of my baby, what we named my son? What is the statistic in terms of the number of pregnancies that will be affected? So 1 in how many? If you can tell me that statistic, that is another possible question that you can answer. And if you remember the name, and this might be a little bit harder, but if you remember the name of the general codes, what's the like library code that you need to have in order for you to be able to have a book like this categorized for people to be able to get it on a bigger frame? So those 4 questions. The first name of the woman that was the inspiration for I Love You Still, the name of my baby boy that I lost, the 1 in how many statistic of how many pregnancies are affected by miscarriage, and then the code that the library would go by. So please DM me. This is going to be anonymous. Nobody but me would know that you're reaching out. So if it's something that you want to do privately, you're more than welcome to do that. Just send me a DM directly. For anyone on here that wasn't on here earlier, my name is Shani Jones, and you can follow me at Shani Speaks Now. I have a YouTube channel, Shani Speaks Now, that you can also get information on. And this is I'm just a person who's sharing my personal story. So hopefully I'll do another live at the very end of the month. I have a friend who is on this live that I've been talking to behind the scenes that I'm hoping will join me. But one of the questions that people always want to know is, how do they support their friends, women, family, people in their lives who may have gone through a miscarriage? And that is a question that I want to discuss a little bit deeper. And also maybe some of the like don'ts when someone has experienced this. A lot of people mean well, but they don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. I was one of those people prior to this being an experience for me. So I'm hoping that me and this friend that joined me will be able to kind of bust some of those myths up a little bit and have that discussion. But Margaret, you are a gem. I will continue to be in touch with you. Thank you so much for the books that you donated for me to be able to give. This is not the last time I think that we will also talk. You can't get rid of me now that I have DM'd you and you responded. So I'm just going to be around somewhere floating in your emails every once in a while. But again, thank you. And I wish you the best. And to all of you that came on this live, those that I didn't know and those that I know personally, I love you all. Thank you so much for your support. I was very nervous at even doing this live in the first place. It's different to be able to put something out there where I can edit and I can, have the right things to say. But when you're live, you don't have that opportunity. So I just wanted to make sure I said the right things. And I also didn't want it to be something where people felt pity for women who are going through this, but it's something for them to feel empowered. It's something for them to get support. It's something for them to feel that they are victors in whatever their journey will be, and something for them to have community and know that they can talk about it openly and not feel any shame, because a miscarriage or pregnancy loss is not your fault. There's nothing that you could do about it ultimately. I believe it's in God's hands. So all you can do is continue to heal and give yourself grace and share your story if that is something you can do, or do the work that you need to do to heal so that you can go forward in the world having a positive perspective. But I appreciate you guys so much. And Margaret, thank you all again. I appreciate you. Hopefully you all enjoy the rest of your evening. All right, take care, everybody. Bye.
Thanks for watching, Faith Fam. Be sure to subscribe, share, and like this episode. And I'll see you back on my channel soon.